Last time my daughter called me Old Bear was the summer she turned 9, right after I'd read her The Jungle Book 4 times in a row and she'd decided Baloo was basically me in cartoon form. That was 23 years ago. So when she said it across the Thanksgiving table, quietly, almost like she didn't mean for anyone else to hear, I felt something shift in my chest before my brain even caught up to what was happening. Old Bear. She was looking at me the way she used to look at me when she was small and had done something she wasn't sure about yet, not scared, more like seeking confirmation that the ground was still solid. I looked at her. She looked at me. Her boyfriend, the one she brought home for the first time that evening, was talking to my wife about something, some restaurant he liked in the city, and his voice filled the dining room the way confident men's voices tend to do. But my daughter wasn't listening to him. She was watching me. I nodded once, just barely. She passed the sweet potatoes and changed the subject, and I spent the rest of dinner being the most attentive, the most pleasant, the most unremarkable version of myself I could manage. His name was Donovan Hale. He was 41, my daughter had told us beforehand, which meant he had 9 years on her. She'd met him at a work conference in Phoenix 4 months earlier. He was in finance, which could mean anything. He had a firm handshake and a very good watch, and he laughed at exactly the right moments in a conversation, which is something I've always found slightly unsettling in a person. Real people laugh at the wrong times sometimes. They laugh too hard, or they don't laugh when they should. Donovan never missed. He called me sir twice. He complimented my wife's green bean casserole with a level of specificity that suggested he'd either noticed the shallots or was very good at pretending to. After dinner, he helped clear the table without being asked. I hated that most of all. My wife pulled me aside in the kitchen while the others were in the living room. "He seems lovely," she whispered. I told her I thought so too. I wasn't ready to say anything else yet. Later, when Donovan had gone out to his car to get something, a bottle of wine he'd forgotten, he said, my daughter appeared in the hallway where I was standing. "Walk with me," she said. She grabbed her coat off the hook. We went out through the side door into the backyard. It was cold, that particular kind of still cold that comes after the sun drops in November, and our breath made small clouds in the dark. "How long?" I asked. She knew what I meant. Probably 2 months, maybe a little longer. I kept thinking I was imagining it. Imagining what, specifically? She wrapped her arms around herself. "He asks a lot of questions about money. Not like weird questions. Just, he's curious. Very curious. About my apartment. About my job. About what I have in savings. He frames it like he's planning for the future. Like we're serious and he's just being responsible." "Are you serious?" I'm not sure now." She paused. "Last week he told me about an investment opportunity, something through his firm. He made it sound like he was doing me a favor letting me in on it." I kept my voice even. "What kind of investment?" "Private equity. Real estate adjacent," he said. "Something about a land trust in the Southwest that was about to be rezoned for development." He said the returns were significant and the window was closing. I'd heard variations of this before, not personally, but my older brother had lost a significant amount of money to something similar in 2009. Through a guy he'd trusted, and I'd spent enough hours listening to him reconstruct it afterward that the shape of it was familiar to me. The urgency, the exclusivity, the casual way it gets introduced like it's almost an afterthought. "Oh, by the way, since we're talking, did he send you anything in writing?" I asked. "He sent me a PDF, a prospectus or something. It looked professional. It had a company logo, a website, all of it." "Did you look up the company?" I Googled it. The website came up. It looked real. "What's the name?" She told me. I didn't recognize it, but that didn't mean much. "Did he ask you to put money in?" "Not directly. He said he wanted me to look it over. He said there was no pressure. He said he just wanted me to know the option was there." The light from the kitchen window fell across the backyard in a long yellow rectangle. Inside, I could see my wife at the sink, her back to us. "How much were we talking about?" I asked. My daughter was quiet for a moment. He mentioned that most participants put in between 30 and 50,000. He said it was a low floor for what the returns would look like. $30,000 to $50,000. My daughter had that. She'd been careful her whole adult life. She drove a sensible car, lived in a reasonable apartment, put money away every month since she was 24. She'd worked hard for every dollar of it. Has he mentioned the opportunity again since the first time? Once. He said a few spots had already filled and he didn't want me to miss the window if I decided I was interested. That, right there, that's the tell. Legitimate investment opportunities don't expire on a schedule designed to match your hesitation. They don't appear once, disappear, reappear with a countdown. The urgency is manufactured, it's calibrated. It's the same reason car salesmen tell you someone else is coming to look at the car tomorrow morning, because the moment you walk out the door to think, you might think clearly. "Tell me about when he first brought it up," I said. "What were you talking about right before?" She thought about it. I'd just gotten a text from my bank, one of those end-of-year account summary things. I mentioned that it had been a pretty good year financially. I said I finally had a cushion I felt good about. I nodded. "Oh," she said quietly. "Oh, that's when." "That's when." She was quiet for a moment. Then, "Dad," I told him the number. Not the exact number, but close. I told him because I was proud of myself. I wanted him to know I was doing okay. "I know. I feel so stupid." "Don't," I said. "That's what he needed you to feel. The stupidity, the embarrassment. It keeps people quiet. It keeps them from asking questions or telling anyone." I looked at her. "You called me Old Bear." She almost smiled. I needed to say something without saying it, in front of him. Smart. I learned from someone. I put my arm around her shoulders. We stood there for a minute in the cold. Then I asked her if she still had the PDF he'd sent her and whether she'd responded to it at all. She had it. She hadn't responded yet. "Good," I said. "Don't respond. Don't say anything to him tonight or tomorrow about any of this. Can you do that?" She said she could. "I need to make a call in the morning." She looked up at me. "Who are you calling?" "A friend who used to work in securities law." I want to pause here and tell you something, because this part matters. I am not a wealthy man. I'm a high school history teacher who's been doing it for 29 years. My wife manages the front office of a pediatric dentist. We are comfortable. We are not connected. I don't have a lawyer on speed dial because I need one regularly. I have one because I coached his son on a youth soccer team 15 years ago, and we stayed close, and he happens to know more about financial fraud than most people I'll ever meet. That is pure luck. I know it is. Most people don't have that call to make. That's part of why I'm telling this story. We went inside. Donovan was back from his car, the wine open, my wife laughing at something he'd said. My daughter sat beside him on the couch. I sat across the room and I watched him for the rest of the evening with different eyes. He was good. I want to give him that because it's important to understand. He wasn't sloppy. He wasn't too eager. He wasn't any of the things you imagine when you imagine a con man, because con men look nothing like what you imagine. He was warm. He was patient. He made people feel interesting when they talked to him. He leaned in when you spoke. He asked follow-up questions. He remembered the name of my wife's sister, whom she'd mentioned once, briefly, an hour earlier. These are not natural gifts deployed innocently. These are tools. They are practiced and refined. And they work because we are wired to respond to them. Being seen, being heard, being remembered. These things reach something deep in us. We are not broken for responding to them. We are human. That's what makes it so effective. He left around 10. He shook my hand, told me it had been a genuine pleasure, said he hoped this was the first of many. I told him I hoped so too. I meant something different by it than he did. The next morning I called my friend. His name doesn't matter for this story, but he asked me to text him the name of the company and the PDF, which my daughter forwarded to me. He got back to me within 2 hours. The company existed. It was registered, a legitimate-looking LLC filed in Delaware, which is where many shell companies get filed because the disclosure requirements are minimal. The website was real in the sense that someone had paid for it and built it. But the principals listed on the registration documents were not the people Donovan had claimed were running the fund. One of the names was a man who had been the subject of an SEC civil enforcement action in 2021 and had agreed to a lifetime bar from the securities industry as part of a settlement. His name was buried in the fine print of the prospectus as a consulting advisor in language so vague it was almost invisible. "This is what they do," my friend told me. "They put together paperwork that looks right from 10 feet away. They use real company structures because real structures are cheap and they make everything look legitimate. But if you actually pull the thread, if you look at who the people are and what their history is, it unravels fast." "Is this criminal?" I asked. "Potentially. Depends on intent and on how much money has moved. Have any victims actually transferred funds?" I told him I didn't know. "Tell your daughter not to give him anything and not to confirm or deny that she's made a decision. If he pressures her, she can tell him she's consulted a financial advisor who has questions. That usually tells you a lot about who you're dealing with." I thanked him. He told me to call anytime. I called my daughter next. I told her what my friend had found. There was a long silence on the line. "He seems so real," she said. "He is real. The realness is the whole point." Another silence. "What do I do now?" I told her what my friend had suggested. She said she could do that. Then she said, "I keep thinking about the other people. If this is what he does, there are other people he's doing it to. Women he's dating, or men, or just people he meets. People who don't have someone to call." I didn't have a good answer for that. She was right, and there wasn't much comfort in it. 2 days later, Donovan asked her if she'd had a chance to review the materials. She told him she'd shared them with her financial advisor and that he had some questions about the principles listed in the registration documents. She said there was a pause, a long one, long enough that she thought the call had dropped. Then he said that was completely understandable and that he'd look into it. He never did. He stopped texting within the week. The calls petered out. By December, he had simply ceased to exist in her life in the way that certain people do when they realize the work required exceeds the return available. She told me about it during Christmas. We were in the kitchen, just the two of us, doing dishes. "Do you think he actually liked me?" she asked. "Like at all?" It was a hard question to answer honestly, and she deserved honesty. "I think he liked that you were someone worth liking," I said. "I think he's probably very good at finding those people." She was quiet. "That's a sad way to live." "Yes," I said, "it is." She handed me a dish to dry. We stood at the sink in the kind of comfortable quiet that takes a long time to build between two people. Outside the window, the yard was dark, same as it had been at Thanksgiving. Same cold, same still air. "Thanks for not making a big thing of it at dinner," she said. When I said it, "Old Bear. You gave me the signal. I just picked it up." "You always do." I want to say something before I finish because I think about this a lot. My daughter is smart. She has a graduate degree. She reads carefully, she asks questions, she is not naive, and she still almost fell for it. Because intelligence is not the variable. Loneliness is the variable. Trust is the variable. The desire to be with someone, to build something with someone, to let your guard down enough to tell them something real, those are the variables. Fraudsters know this. They specialize in it. They find you when you're open, and they make themselves look exactly like what you've been hoping for. There is no checklist that fully protects you from that, but there are some things worth knowing. If someone introduces a financial opportunity into a personal relationship, slow down. Not because financial conversations between partners are inherently wrong, but because the timing matters. The first few months of a relationship are not when legitimate partners present investment vehicles. They're when you're most open, most trusting, most likely to say yes to something you'd otherwise examine carefully. If there's urgency, if the window is closing, if spots are filling, if you need to decide before next week, that urgency is a tool being used against you. Legitimate investments do not expire at the rate of your hesitation. They are not structured to race your judgment. If someone you're dating knows more about your savings than your best friend does, ask yourself how that happened, not as an accusation, just as a question. And if you can, talk to someone, a parent, a sibling, a friend, a financial advisor, anybody. Not because you can't make decisions yourself, but because people who want to take something from you need you isolated. They need your embarrassment and your privacy to do their best work. The moment you tell someone else, the spell starts to break. My daughter still calls me Old Bear sometimes, usually when she's tired or when something's gone a little sideways and she needs to hear a familiar voice. I don't ever want her to stop. She didn't lose any money. She didn't lose her confidence. Not really, though it took a few months before she laughed the way she used to laugh. She did something right without knowing it. She trusted a feeling, and she found a way to tell me without saying a word, and that was enough. Not everyone gets that outcome. I know that. I think about the people who wire the money before anyone asks questions, the ones who are too embarrassed afterward to say what happened, the ones who didn't have a signal or didn't have someone to send it to. If there's anything I want you to take from this, it's that the signal doesn't have to be dramatic. It doesn't have to be a code word or a childhood nickname or something out of a movie. It can just be a phone call. It can just be a phone call. It can just be, hey, can I tell you something? Something doesn't feel right. That's enough. That's more than enough. It's often all it takes. I've thought a lot about what actually saved my daughter. And it wasn't me. Not really. I was just the person she called the signal toward. What saved her was something she'd been building her whole life without knowing it had a name. A kind of inner compass, the ability to feel something was wrong before she could prove it was wrong. And then, and this is the part most people skip, the courage to say so. Not loudly, not dramatically, just a word across a dinner table. 2 words. Old Bear. That was enough. There's a version of this story where she talks herself out of the feeling, where she decides she's being paranoid or unfair or too suspicious of the man who'd done nothing provably wrong yet, where embarrassment wins over instinct. I've seen that version happen to people. Smart people, careful people, people who had every reason to trust themselves and still couldn't quite get there in the moment that counted. The shame of admitting you might have been foolish is a powerful thing. Donovan understood that better than most. What I keep coming back to is this. He wasn't undone by any failure of his own. His paperwork was real. His website was real. His manner was impeccable. He was undone because my daughter had enough honesty with herself to acknowledge the discomfort she felt and enough character to reach towards someone she trusted instead of swallowing it alone. That's not a small thing. That is, I think, the whole thing. I'm a history teacher. I've spent nearly 30 years telling young people that the past is not just a list of events, it's a record of what happens when people act with integrity and what happens when they don't. Cause and consequence. Every outcome has a chain of choices running behind it. Donovan's outcome was the result of his choices, accumulated over years. My daughter's outcome was the result of hers, a lifetime of small decisions, to be honest, to stay curious, to trust her own perception even when it was inconvenient. Those qualities don't appear overnight. They get built through discomfort, through being wrong and admitting it, through choosing the harder and more truthful path when the easier one was right there. My daughter had done that work. She didn't know she was doing it. Nobody does while they're doing it, but it shows up when it matters. If I could say one thing to anyone who sees something in this story that feels familiar, a relationship that asks too many questions about your finances, an opportunity that seems designed to race your better judgment, a feeling you keep explaining away, it would be this: your discomfort is data. Don't delete it because it's inconvenient. Don't let the embarrassment of admitting uncertainty keep you from telling one person you trust. You don't have to have it all figured out before you say something. You just have to say something. 2 words, a phone call, a glance across a table. That's enough to change the whole story.